it was legitimate. We had a great conversation. And what came through really quickly, he could talk endlessly about the nonprofit where he was financial manager, but he got tongue-tied when he tried to talk about himself. It was very uncomfortable for him. He didn't know how to present what the value of what he brought to the table. It felt too much like bragging to him. He didn't feel comfortable going to business social type events. So we worked on his storytelling, got him really good at seeing how can he present in a natural way that isn't bragging, that people really want to know what he has to say and engage them. And pretty soon he found he really enjoyed those business events that he previously had been avoiding. The first one he went to, he met a rancher who had a huge operation in Catalan, flew him over to talk about a consulting assignment, setting up a whole nother operation. And pretty soon he landed as the global controller for one of the world's largest NGOs. So storytelling is really critical to everything you do if you want to really make an impact with people. And so here's the agenda. I have just a really quick self-assessment, just 4 questions I want you to rate yourself on. I'm not going to ask you to share the results with me or anyone else on the call, so be honest with yourself. Um, then we'll talk about the psychology behind stories. Why are they so important? What makes them critical? What do you need to focus on? And then I'll share a way to approach 2 specific types of stories. One is your hero story, and one is what I call to care stories. And we'll get into what those are at that point. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I like things to be interactive. This is really a session for all of you. So if you have a question, an observation, you want to interrupt, if Ken or Charlie want to step in and add something to what I'm saying, by all means, jump in at any time.
John,
So
will you make the slide deck available to the participants?
yes, I will give you the slides, and we're recording this, so you'll all get a link to the recording as well. So here's the self-assessment. Just rate yourself on these 4 questions, from 1 being a complete novice to 10 being an absolute expert. So the first is, I
In
have
what
a
area?
sorry?
No, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
All good.
I have a unique selling proposition that makes me stand out from others. 2, I deliver that proposition confidently in every interview, every networking one-on-one, every meeting with a prospect. Because I know we've got people on both sides of the spectrum. 3, I have 20 or more concise and compelling accomplishment stories that describe clear results. And 4, I work a story seamlessly into every answer I give to an interview question or every explanation I give to a networking contact or prospect. So now you've rated yourself on these 4. Here's how you should view the scale. If you rated yourself a 1 to 4, that's really holding you back. That's something you need to get help on fast. Find a really good book, find a coach, find a class, whatever you need to do to get to move that up. If you have a unique selling proposition that's not very good, you need to sharpen that really quickly. It's going to really hold you back in everything you do. If you got a 5 to 7, okay, you got some skills there. What can you do to move that up? What can you do to improve that to a true mastery level? And if you've got given 8 to 10, do 2 things. First, go out and validate that score. If I believe my unique selling proposition makes me stand out from others, I want to go find some people that I respect in my field and present it to them. Have them honestly rate it themselves and see if I really am an 8 to 10. In fact, I also want to do it with people who are not in my field, who are not. So I make sure that it's not just jargonish, that only people who are experts in this will have a clue what I'm saying. So Because sometimes we fool ourselves. We think we're better than we are. So see if you are as good as you are. If you are, then that's something you want to lean into. If I have a great unique selling proposition, what can I do to make sure I get that in front of key executives throughout the area I'm looking for a job, key executives throughout the area where I am trying to build my consulting practice? Do I have it really well engaged in my LinkedIn profile and other places so that I'm getting the maximum benefit from that unique selling proposition, for example? Because it tends to be that once we get to that level of mastery, we kind of forget. We like, oh, I got it covered, and we don't use it. We don't take as much advantage as we could. So don't make that mistake. So, oh, and before I forget, a number of you already are getting my career tips, but anyone who's not, if you want to sign up for my career tips newsletter, which gives expert advice on marketing yourself, you can go to my website, which is shown there, and there's a box at the upper right that says Get Career Tips, or you can drop me an email. And if you sign up today, what I'll do is I'll also send you a series I developed. It's one email a day for 2 weeks on building influence, how to build influence in meetings, in interviews, in interactions with other people. And everyone tells me they get a lot of good pointers out of that, psychology, techniques, strategy. So yeah, then if you're already getting career tips and you haven't gotten building influence, by all means, just drop me a note. I'll be happy to send it to you. So why are stories important? Let's start with what you all think. Why do you think stories are important? I mean, Charlie gave a really good, concise idea for that at the beginning, but what about the rest of you? Why do you think stories are important?
They
John,
allow other people to resonate. You know, your story can't resonate with the entire population, but there are parts of your story that will resonate with parts of it. And then you're creating connection, and building a brand that way.
Yep, creating connection, building a brand, people resonate with the story. Right.
It helps
And
people visualize what you're talking about. There's an application to it.
yeah, it's much. If I can get into that story, I'm going to remember it. It's going to be much more memorable. It's going to be much more engaging. Yeah, Charlie, you wanted to suggest something?
I'm going to touch on what Ken Scher said earlier about trust. It's very difficult for people to trust if you're nothing but a lexicon of words to describe yourself. When you tell a story, you reveal your humanity, your empathy, all those kind of things that are important to people in a hiring decision. People like to hire people that share their values, their outlook on life, their beliefs. And those things can come through in the stories that we tell.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting dynamics is that when we're constructing our stories, often we forget that. We try to be too professional. We eschew the emotional component, but the emotional component is really what grabs people. So we're trying to be really professional. Here's what I did, here's where I did it, instead of here's why. Here's what the rationale was. Here's what would have happened if we hadn't done this. That's the part that really grabs people, that emotional content.
I think also to springboard off of both you and Charlie, that's how I always describe culture. It's by the stories we tell. And we don't always realize that we're sharing our values, our self-identities, what's important. Because many years ago, I worked for AT&T at the first bombing of the World Trade Center. And so the president of our division kept getting death notices. So they switched him with another president. And the new president coming in said that they had read in the Wall Street Journal that there was going to be a layoff of 3,200 people. And they kept asking in the town meeting, and the president kept saying, no, the Wall Street Journal is wrong, and they don't know what they're talking about. And somebody asked him, did he find the leak? And he said, no, because there isn't a leak. And then everybody knew that it was true, that the Wall Street Journal had gotten it right. And I think sometimes we don't realize all the messages we send in the stories that we tell. That
Yeah.
because it's not head on, where we're trying to be conscious of every word. It's whether we care about integrity or caring about other people, that it's not just buzzwords. It's proof in the pudding.
Yeah, I remember just a few months ago, the example with Jamie Dimon, who got caught. People are really upset about his edict that everyone's going to go back into the office full time, and he was caught on at a town hall. He was asked a question about it. It was presented with some petition by thousands of employees about their desire to continue hybrid, and he was caught on tape saying something to the effect of, I don't care the F how many people send petitions, we are coming back to the office, which really revealed a lot about his attitude towards people and his employees and all of that. Ken.
Yeah, and I was going to add, I mean, I think everything has been said so far about why stories are important makes 100% sense. I think on a very, I don't know, if visceral is the right word, or a human level, everybody loves a good story. People, they're compelling, they're memorable, and they can and will separate you from the crowd when you tell a good story that conveys the value that you have to bring to that particular conversation.
Absolutely. So here's the list I put ahead of time. They're a way you connect with people on an emotional level, and that is so important in everything you're trying to do here. And they demonstrate you can communicate. Don't forget, don't neglect that part, that just the fact that you tell a good story shows people, oh, this is someone who he can connect with people, he can communicate, we can rely on him or her for that. And your stories are unique to you. Other people have done similar things to what you've done or have similar credentials or qualifications, but nobody has your specific story. So this is where you start to set yourself apart and create your unique value proposition. And they show how you think and act in different situations. But fundamentally, they prove your point, but with engagement. So there's a saying that every sale is based on emotion and justified by logic. And this is no less true in the interview process, in the sale prospect when you're meeting with a prospect for your consulting practice. We like to think that we are making logical decisions, but so much of it is driven by the emotional content, and then we justify it. I don't go out and buy a red sports car because that is the logical thing for me to have. I go out and buy a red sports car because when I was a kid, I always dreamed of having one. Or I think it'll make me a babe magnet. Or I love the feel of the wind through the hair I used to have. Or there are all these different things that go through my head, and I have to go and get this red sports car. And then the logic kicks in. I look for the one that I can get the best price, or that has the best maintenance record, or the best mileage, or I look for that logic side to now justify my choice. So in an interview or in a meeting with a prospect, it's exactly the same thing. I need that emotional content that gets someone imagining me in the job or imagining me providing them these services or this product. The facts, the figures, the skills, the credentials, that's all the logic side of the equation. But the stories bring in the emotion side. So the sweet spot is when I have really powerful, compelling stories backed up by solid results. So the other fundamental concept I want to make sure you all leave with today, always leave them wanting to know more. And try to approach this with everything you do. Try to approach this with your 30-second pitch when you're asked to introduce yourself at a meeting like this, when you're putting your LinkedIn profile together, when in your resume, in your cover letter, in your marketing brochure, in the emails you send out. Think about, what can I do that will leave the reader or the listener wanting to know more, instead of focusing on what can I tell them. So one of the fundamental concepts, one of the ways this factors in, is when I tell a story, the more I go into detail, the more I go into how I did it, the less powerful the story becomes. Those are good follow-ups in the story. When the person is really engaged, they want to know more, and they say, well, tell me how you did it. Okay, now I can go into that more. But I try to stay away from too much detail. So that's the story I told about Felipe in the beginning. I didn't tell very much about what we did to get him really good at storytelling. I focused on the problem he was facing and the result that we got to because he got really good at storytelling. And that would lead someone to say, well, that's really interesting. I need to know more about how John did this. I want to talk about that. By the way, there are a couple of slides where you'll see something at the bottom here. That what that means is, if you go to my website, there's a search bar in the upper right. If you type the term limit, it will bring up an article called Limit the Buy, which is all about this. It's particularly focused on resume, but the concept it's talking about applies to everything. You can search on all different things. I have tons of articles and resources out there on my website, but that's just one that you can get to. Oh, okay. Sorry. Allison meant that to be to Charlie. Okay.
Forgive me.
So the key here is you leave people wanting to know more, but then you got to be prepared to deliver. You don't be stuck like this Apteryx that no one's ever asked him. So he never thought about what do I say next? How do I get past this now that they've said they want to know more? So in the interview or in another meeting that you have, how many find it a little uncomfortable when you're asked, tell me a little bit about your background? Usually when I present to job search groups, I'd say half the people typically say they hate this question. They feel really uncomfortable trying to answer it. But in fact, this is a great opportunity. This is one of the best things that you could be asked. It's a layup if you do it right. In fact, if you're not asked it, a really good strategy is to tease it out yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So if you handle this the right way, you get to start things off in the right place. You get the chance to draw the picture you want seen and start the interview on the right foot. And if you're prepared, you can draw a masterpiece for them. If you're unprepared, good luck with what's going to happen. So how do you prepare for this story? I have a template, and you can use whatever style works for you, but I found that this is a good way to think about it that's worked very well for my clients. Call it the hero story. And so you start with a headline, because if I just jump into the story without giving some introduction, the listener is left wondering, where is this going? So I start with a headline. I then explain my experience, but I make sure not just to talk about my experience, but to bring in some key results along the way. And unlike the resume, I do not go, resumes are typically reverse chronological. Never do that, because you want your story pointed in the right direction. It's really ineffective if I start with, well, most recently I was the senior product manager doing da 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 da. Before that, I was the assistant product manager doing this. And before that, I was a junior. And I'm going away from the most powerful part. I'm going away from where I want to be headed. Then I get to just a quick summary of the rest of my qualifications to the extent I didn't cover them in going through my experience. And I finish with an objective so that there's some place the story's going. It doesn't just trail off. If it's an interview, the objective is probably going to be, and that's why I'm here, because I am so excited about the culture of your company, and I really want to be part of it. That's why I'm here, because I think I can do X, Y, and Z in this role. So, but if it's more general, if it's a networking meeting, it might be, well, my objective might be, well, here's what the ideal situation would look like for me. So I finish it with whatever objective makes sense. And you can find, as I mentioned, you can find the template and some discussion about this in an article on my website. So how do I tell the story? So I'll give you an example. Suppose I've decided that I'm tired of being a career coach on my own, having to build my practice one person at a time, and then they move on, and I've got to get new clients, and I don't want to have to manage all this stuff myself. I just want to go working for a company as an executive coach. So if I were in an interview for a Fortune 100 company for an executive coaching role, the story I might tell would be along these lines. So I graduated from Stanford and I blew it because I left off my headline. So I help professionals accelerate their career and their job search. I started out with a degree in math and economics from Stanford, and I went into the actuarial profession. Went to work for Equitable, at the time, the third largest insurance company, in their actuarial training program. I rotated through all different functional areas and jobs, ultimately ending up as the disability product manager. And in that role, I was really excited when I was given the chance to figure out how we could measure productivity, which wasn't being done in the 70s in insurance companies and financial services. So I had to apply industrial techniques. And in the end, the presentation I made for Equitable's first ever company-wide productivity improvement contest won our entire 150-person department $3,000 bonuses. I then was recruited by Commercial Life to build an actuarial department from scratch. So I did all the hiring, recruiting, mentoring, career development for that group for the next 13 years. Along the way, I was given charge of a non-actuarial group, our compliance unit, that had a manager who had basically retired on the job. They were demoralized. They weren't really that productive. And so I went in, figured out how could we reorganize things? How could we re-engage everyone? And the end result was that we were able to do 60% more projects without any increase in headcount, and everyone loved what they were doing. They were recognized as one of the most productive units in our company. I then decided to pivot, and I built a consulting practice, earned over $2.5 million in revenues. And along the line, I was helping people with job search, with how to market themselves. And so for the next 2 decades, I basically helped hundreds of people land the job and pay they deserve. And so when I put it all together, I believe that what I bring together is a deep understanding of how companies work, how the functions operate together, how to engage people, how to present in a way that gets people really excited about what they're doing. And I would like to bring that to a company like yours, where I could help your executives and your wannabe executives become and be seen as influential leaders. So, why do you think, you notice I went all the way back to college in that story. And I often get the question, well, do I have to go back to college? That's a long ways back. My answer is no. Why do you think I went all the way back to college in my story?
Shows as a part of your personality more than just a job-oriented exercise.
Okay, that could be part of it. What else?
I would say it also shows the trajectory of your choices and your professional life. So it shows, okay, are you a one vertical kind of person, or have you been in 3 different industries? And if you've been in 3 different industries, it opens up questions, or it gives you the opportunity to say, why? What about, I took these skills and I put it here. I really loved getting into marketing. I had no idea, because I went to culinary school, why I went into marketing. It sort of paints the picture of your life, and I think it makes it a little more colorful, and is just good fodder for more conversation with the recruiter.
Okay. Charlie.
John, in your opening sentence or two, you set the stage for your ending. You want to go do in corporate America what you've been fired up and you've been doing most of your career of helping other people. Now you want to institutionalize it with a larger organization. So I think the structure of the story is great.
Thanks.
I think it also shows a strong foundation of skill set, that's where you started, that you're not just somebody who fell into it. Oh, one day I woke up and decided I'm going to be a coach. That, you have approach to how you gain information, how you structure it, that you're on solid ground. It's the blueprint for the house you built upon it, or the company you built upon it, that you started at the ground level with the basics, and that you have the skills and the credibility to back it up.
Okay. David?
Because you have a strong hard pivot from a technical skill to a soft skill. So in order to justify or explain your hard pivot, you need a longer time frame to explain, no, it's not a pivot. It was underlying everything I have done in my life. So you need, in order to get that consistency demonstrated, you need to extend the timeline, show the underlying of organizational and restructuring and getting the best out of people. And then you're showing that theme of getting the best out of people, showing here, and in fact, it's not a pivot. It's the same idea in a different setting.
All of those are correct in terms of the story overall, but there is one reason, and one reason only, that I go all the way back to college, because of Stanford, because I know that has some cachet. If I went to if I went to the local community college, I wouldn't bother to go all the way back to college. I would still go back to my actuarial days, because yes, that shows the pivot. It shows a lot of different things that are relevant. But that's the only reason I go all the way to college, because I know from experience it's going to have an impact. And this is part of the storytelling. Think of what things in your background, in your stories, are going to have impact, and what don't matter that much. Lori, yeah.
Sometimes it can be used against you. I actually had a job where the person said that they hired me in spite of where I went to school. And I have found oftentimes, because I have strong academic foundation credentials, that I have to really downplay it, because some people are intimidated by me even before I get there, and since I have such a wallflower, milk toasty kind of personality, for those who know me, that's not. If I don't downplay it, oftentimes they're like, oh, well, I don't have what you have. I mean, I actually had somebody tell me that, in addition to the person who hired me anyway, and he was the CEO. So how do you know in advance when to play it up, when to play it down?
Well, you do a lot of research. Do a lot of research into the culture. Do a lot of research into the people. Do a lot of research into what sort of people do they hire? Because like they're law firms that basically only hire from people who went to a certain school or a certain couple of law schools, that sort of thing. So I do all the research I can to find out, and my network can help me with that. And then some of it is positioning. Like suppose I knew ahead that this was a firm where they tended to look down on people who went to West Coast schools, and they are really big on the Ivy Leagues. So then I might not bring it into the story. I bring all the other elements. I bring the things that might engage them and let it come out later in the process where they say, well, where did you go to school? And now, if I've already engaged them and they like what they're hearing, the reaction where before, if I started, they might come, oh, he went to Stanford. We don't want it. They say, wow, I like what I'm hearing, despite the fact that he went to Stanford. So it actually can kind of work in my favor later in the conversation. It's like when I was in the actuarial world, I used to regularly have people surprised when they found out I was an actuary. Or they'd say, you don't talk like other actuaries we've talked to. And so it actually became a positive where if I started out there, a lot of them had a negative impression of actuaries that, oh yeah, they're these green eye shade guys who can't talk, and they talk that everything they say has 5 decimal places. So in your case, holding some of those things back and letting them come out judiciously in response to something might be a much more effective approach. That they're like, well, they now it's like, you know, wow, and she has this. That sounds like it really is going to add a lot to what Lori can bring to the table here. So, second thing, I worked as an actuary for over 20 years. How much actuarial work did I describe in my story? Yeah, zero. I didn't hide that I was an actuary. I talked about things that I had accomplished during that period. But what I tried to do was make sure that the results I brought out, the things that I emphasized, were related to where I want to go. Don't try to cover everything. Pick what's important to your story. This is your story. It's okay to combine jobs, to omit aspects that don't seem relevant. It's okay. And I don't have to talk about, even if they say, walk me through your resume, that doesn't mean I literally have to walk them through every piece of my resume. I can say, well, in this era, I did these things. And they can come back and say, well, give me some more detail on that. Tell me which jobs. But this is your story. And try to show motivation, not just what you did, but what drew you into this. What made this so interesting to you? Like I tried to bring in a little bit about the pivots. I didn't get into a lot of detail about why, which leads to more questions. Someone says, "Well, I'm curious, what made you change from actuarial work to coaching?" Well, tell me more about that, which is good. So, would anyone like to take a stab at telling their story, and we can give you some feedback on how to make it even more engaging? This is where everyone suddenly goes quiet. There was actually there's a great book I love. Did I put it back there? I just got it back from my friend. Yeah, it's Never Split the Difference. Which if you're interested in a great book on negotiation, it's by a guy who with the FBI and did tons of hostage negotiations. But he applies it to career, to business, to everything, and it's really good. But he tells a story in there of how he used to do these classes, on negotiation. And the first thing he'd say, he'd look for a volunteer, but he'd say, look, I know you're all sitting there thinking that this is going to be incredibly painful and you don't want to do it. Well, it's going to be even worse than you could possibly imagine, and that's how you're going to get all the value from the course. And suddenly he'd get a whole lot of people raising their hand. So Jeff, you raised your hand. Thank you for that. Would you was that to suggest something? Can you share the name of the book and the author? Are you talking about the negotiation book, Allison? Allison, are you still? Yes. Okay. It is never.
Sorry, I gave you a thumbs up, so I didn't want to. Yes.
It's
please.
Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, Voss. I've read it a couple of times. I really like it. In fact, I picked it up because one time a client he was hiring me to help his daughter, and when I just wanted to chat, make sure he understood my approach, and he said, "Wow, have you read this book? Because what you're describing, the way you approach it, it sounds a lot like what he's talking about." I said, "Oh well, I got to pick this up," and I learned a lot from that book. So Jeff, did you have a question, or were you going to share your story?
I was going to share.
Great. Okay. A round of applause for Jeff for being willing to share. So go ahead.
First one to jump out of the airplane with the parachute. Yeah. Well, I solved difficult problems that other people seem to have challenges in solving. And a lot of my clients tend to be companies that are large enterprises with problems that they're just stuck on. And I find that people tend to evolve into a certain groupthink. And what I'm able to do is come around the problem in a different way, restructure this actual problem statement in order to solve it. I mean, as an example, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission issued a request for proposal way back when to identify the vulnerabilities of America's nuclear power and then come up with solutions. And all the other bidders bid the same consultants. There were only like a half dozen people in the country who did this kind of work. And so even though there were different bidders, they were bidding some of the same people as consultants to try to solve the problem. And my solution was to offer a contest in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and around Caltech in Pasadena, California, where people would win a prize for coming up with the best vulnerabilities and be offered the opportunity then to work on the solution to those vulnerabilities. And the idea was to get fresh ideas, something that now is known as open innovation, but this was back before open innovation existed. I've helped other companies. There's a wide belief in the blockchain community. There's a concern that because blockchains are immutable, they cannot be changed, that if you put information on a blockchain, personal information, and you want it removed, it can't be removed. And so you're stuck with it forever. And that violates a lot of the new privacy rules. And the notion that you could remove something and still have an immutable blockchain was something that people just assumed was something that couldn't be solved, but I was able to solve and actually patent a solution to do that. That's kind of where I would stop.
Okay. Any thoughts from people? I have some thoughts, but let's let anyone else. What grabbed you? What would you improve? What do you think?
If I can alter, I always hear you and Ken and Charlie in my head, don't bury the lead. I would have brought the patent up much earlier because I was like, whoa, that's amazing. And so I would grab the person's attention a little earlier and then tell them how you got there, because I think that is super impressive. Like, it's like, ooh, can I touch you? That you solved such a big issue, but I had to wait till you got there. And so I just want you to, I hear everything you tell me every month when I come. So I would say don't bury the lead.
Okay. I'd say that the opening headline, you could sharpen that. You talked about solving different problems, solving difficult problems, and clients are large enterprises. They get stuck on problems. I think you could have compressed that and had more impact. And I help large enterprises who get stuck on really difficult problems. Whatever you want to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
I help them overcome the groupthink that gets them stuck on difficult problems. And I would pick one of those two stories, those two examples, so that you have more impact of either one. What I missed, the blockchain leads to a patent, which is good. The NRC led to open innovation before that it was a thing, but I felt like there was another stage, another result, an end result because you created this open innovation. How did that move things forward? Or the patent, how did you have this patented solution? How did that change things for the future blockchain or for your clients in that arena? So I felt like you could have gone one step further in either one of those, and they would grab me even more. And then I think some ending, and I'd like to bring this to, it depends on who you're talking to. Is it a prospect? Is it a company that's stuck? But something that finishes it off so it doesn't just end and trail off.
Got it.
Any other thoughts from anyone?
We have some hands up, John.
Yeah. Were those about that, or were that Charlie? Did you?
No, David
I'm
was
happy
first.
to go next. I don't have a strong comment on Jeff.
Okay. Kathleen, did you have a comment you wanted to make, or you were putting your hand up to go next too?
Just my comment in terms of what you just said, John. I was waiting for the objective, the ending, as well. So, but very well done.
So,
Charlie?
Jeff, I've known you a long time. I find it hard to define you in 4 or 5 words. So based on this story, how would you define yourself? So I remember you. If I hear somebody use that term, I'll immediately think of Jeff. Because you have an incredible talent for seeing what other people don't see, Jeff. They've been staring at it for years, and you come in and, it's scary how quickly you can find a solution or find a better way of doing things. So what kind of words might you use to capture people's attention? So that could be like John's saying, that could be the opening line of your story.
Yeah. I mean, the issues that I come across just in kind of responding to that is that, I could say I see things other people don't see, and it immediately just causes everyone to be skeptical. They're immediately pushing back, and I don't want to invite that as much as
You could ask
curiosity.
A question. Jeff, you could turn it into a question, which would engage them.
Excellent thought.
Yeah, do that, and then you tell your story. Then, to Kathleen's point, you wrap up by answering the question at the end.
Yeah.
Now you pulled them in. Now they'll be more accepting of what you say. You won't push them away. You'll bring them in.
Yeah.
And even bringing in that point about the skepticism, that bring it up yourself somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, because others are going to feel that way. It might be a way to hey, they were skeptical, but here's where we got to.
Right. I'm running out of power. I'll talk for a minute.
Gotta plug in. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
David, you wanted to share your story?
Sure, I didn't prepare, so I'll let so humor me on that one. I am a non-conventional actuary. I'm a non-conventional actuary for American eyes because I have a French accent and I did my actual certification in France, at the top school that you have never heard about. And I worked in companies that you have never heard about, Prévoir, or maybe BNP Paribas, which you probably know them as a sponsor of the French Open. And when I came to the US, I did my due diligence and understand the American product and such. But I was always having an innovation, a different spin than the reserving and pricing actuary. In the beginning, I focused on risk management. And then I joined the Society of Actuaries for more than 10 years, focusing on thought leadership and AI and technology. And now with the next move I am in, I focus on startups and helping companies innovate and finding different ways to work the insurance industry and realize and succeeding in doing what they know best, working with numbers to make to bring a security for the society. Let's talk together. What is your problem? Let's find together a way to solve it.
Okay. What do people think? Did you have a good sense of what David does?
I think that he undersold himself. So maybe a great way to start is to share something about how big changes or change comes from outside, and that what you bring, because you come from France, that you provide an opportunity for us to take a look at ourselves in a different way. Because I think of groupthink and unconscious bias and all those things we try to help people understand, because we look at it from the same perspective all the time. And coming from another country, certainly one that we have positive thoughts about. So, it's not like country you go like, oh, we love everything French. We love the way you talk. We love the way you dress, the way you cook. So I think that would be a great way to start. That's what makes you unique. That you're bringing an external, global, international perspective on how we do things here. And then I probably say some good things we do, and then go into the opportunities to like flatter a little bit before you tear us apart.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If there's a headline that I understand what it's about before you get into the, I work for a company, top companies that you've never heard of. I went to a top school you've never heard of, which was funny, but it was kind of the context wasn't there. Where, as Lori's saying, if you had this headline about the different perspectives, now that might land. I see that. Charlie?
Yeah, David, what I heard is that you're always starting relationships or conversations with people where people are skeptical to begin with, and you're immediately on the defensive. You have to prove to them that you are equal to, if not better than, the average American. My question to you is, what percentage of the time are you able to turn them around to your point of view?
I don't know.
Go back and take a look at that, because I bet you the numbers are very, very high. Because we have a saying in America: you can't judge a book by its cover. So they hear the accent, they make certain judgments. They hear the schools, they make certain judgments. And stories are a way of turning people around to get them to buy into thinking that they may not have been open to before, right? And I think that would be a great theme. It causes people to want to listen to you, because this just sounded to me like part of your pitch to get them to talk to you, right? So just tell them, listen, you may not agree with me off the bat, but 80% of the people felt the way you did right now. And they're grateful they sat down and talked to me. What, are you open to new ideas? Are you open to new ways of acting, behaving, or getting different results? So I see that you could really grab people in a different kind of way than some of the other people on this call could. So
I really like that. That brings in the confidence factor too, that you're presenting this confident message.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the feedback.
Okay, so let's look at this. This was the hero story, which is your overall story for particularly in interviews, networking meetings. So one thing you can do to try to firm up your story, ask friends or experts in your area to rate your story. Tell them to, you want them to honestly rate it, and here are some of the ratings you could ask them to rate it on. Did it engage and hold your interest? Did it communicate my passion? Were you left wanting to know more? Were concrete results incorporated seamlessly into the story? And did it sell me? Now, if it's for a job, did it sell me for this job? If it's for, just networking in general, did it sell me for what it is that I say I do? And, and see if you can get your story really hitting on all of those points. Now, some people say, well, they never asked me to share my background, so what do I do? Well, it's easy enough. They say, well, tell us why we should hire you, or tell me why I should buy your product or service. Well, I can turn that around and say, well, to answer that, I need to tell you a little bit about my background. And I basically give myself permission to tell my story. I just make sure I finish it with a direct answer to whatever they asked. They say, and that's why you should consider my services, because I will do X, Y, and Z for you. Or that's why you should hire me, because I will bring X, Y, and Z to your operation. So I can ask it myself, in effect. And the delivery is critical. A lot of people struggle with this. It's I forget parts. Like I forgot to throw my opening headline in the story. But it's okay if your story comes out different. In fact, that's part of the key. Script your story out and then tear up the script, because you want your story to be a little different every time you tell it. That's what keeps it fresh. That's what keeps it not sounding like it's just a robot delivering this story. Because as soon as you've got a memorized script, your story will stop being effective at all. And if you're struggling with that, shorten it. If I can't get out my whole, I don't people were asking how long should these be? For this opening story, my guideline is up to 2 minutes. Because if I keep going longer, there's a strong risk that I have gone way beyond what someone wants to hear. They're not seeing me as able to communicate well. If you can do it in a minute, great. I feel like telling your whole story, you deserve a little more time than that, but try to keep it under 2 minutes. So if you're struggling to present it, you find yourself like having to think a lot, having to look it up. Okay, shorten it. Do the 30-second version. When you get really comfortable with the 30-second version, then you can add the next 15 seconds. And when you get really comfortable with that, add the next. And keep doing that until you get to the story that you're happy with, that you can deliver smiling, confidently, without rushing to try to get through every element of it. So now let's look at accomplishment stories. These are the shorter stories, which now for accomplishment stories, I advocate no more than a minute. Because again, there's a rigor to it that forces you to stay with the most important elements and leave the rest for follow-up questions. So these are your talking points for your interviews, for networking, for meetings with prospects. These are how you equip contacts to engage others on your behalf. These are the source of the powerful bullet points in your resume or your engagement bio or whatever you're using. These are basically confidence boost. When I have these, when I feel prepared, I can think at a different level because I'm not having to think about what story. And I advocate that, particularly in an interview, every single answer that you give, even if it's tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weakness, everything that you answer, you should incorporate a story. It may not be a full 1 minute story in every one. It might just be a line from a story, but you want to incorporate something that presents results or challenges solved in every single answer that you give. So, what are the critical elements to build into a story? Here's the template that I use. And people use stars, pars, cars. They're all different sorts of formats. They're all covering the same ground. But the reason I came up with my own is because I found that people typically underemphasize challenges. And that is one of the most critical elements of the story. That when you present the challenges really well, it creates a contrast to the results that you achieved ultimately. So I'll give you an example. This is from a class I did a long time ago. Someone came up with a story that I really liked. So I assumed the operation of a 12-year-old actuarial recruiting business. I had no training and I faced a lot of technical hurdles. The presentations had to be made via a finicky fax machine. There was no online candidate database, so every job order meant that I had to pour through 1,000 hard copy resumes for potential candidates. So I set out to create and populate a database with 12 years of candidates. Over the next year, I converted everything to a modern application and designed an integrated website. That website allowed candidates to search and apply for jobs and employers to submit job orders online. The result was that the time to source candidates was reduced from hours to minutes. The candidate and client data now exist on easy-to-use multi-purpose Excel files with a website that globalizes our business and provides a really professional image. And it's set up for a seamless transition if I should leave or add to staff. So what do you think? Did that story grab your attention? Did it bring in that emotional content? I mean, some of the things I love about this was that just I could picture right away. Now, nowadays, faxes, they're actually making a comeback again. But I remember when fax machines would wobble back and forth, and you'd end up with a resume that's like skewed because of it. So that picture in my mind right away, and the fact that someone pouring through all of these hard copy resumes, and then the fact that she was able to turn that around to something where it's modern, they can do it online. It's, the source time to sourcing is reduced from hours to minutes. To me, that's the essence of a really good story, that I can picture it. And it's got clear results, clear challenges that you have to overcome. What do you think of that last statement there?
For me, that's all about culture. That's about integrity, character. Probably the most important line, and I do remember those fax machines, and they also smelled really badly. And I worked in a bank for the summer, and as the summer help, I had to sit next to the fax machine. And every time somebody wanted a signature so somebody could take money out of the bank, I would like, oh my God, it's time to go to the ladies' room. But it tells who you are, that it wasn't just to control power, but to share, make life better and easier for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, that last one, I think that's spot on. And I the person who is proud of doing that and is not afraid to tell me that's a core of what they bring is one of the most important, most valuable people I could hire. Because so many people are afraid to emphasize that. They're afraid to do it because they think they're going to lose their job if they create something that doesn't need them. But instead, they're showing that they're not afraid to do that. Yeah, David.
What you're presenting is the first few blocks of a pitch deck. And there are usually many more items in a pitch deck. So usually the items are intro, problem, solution, market opportunity, product. So you're touching problem, solution, and product. But you're not doing like a business model, traction, competition, a go-to-market strategy, teams, and so on, which is appropriate because it's not a pitch deck. But I'd say, should we make sure that all the other aspects are touched elsewhere, like team is so you're selling yourself and that type of things?
Well, that's going to depend on the context. In this context, if I'm in an interview telling the story, I don't think so. Those would weigh it down. Then be more of a formal presentation to this executive group where they're expecting all those details. But I also want to leave room for further discussion. For well, how do we do this? Tell me more. Tell me more about the market. Tell me. So even when I'm presenting those things, I want to be careful to raise questions, show that I have a lot of expertise in this area, not necessarily show all the solutions. Ken, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. First of all, one reason why I like process to begin with, whether it's cars, I use stars personally, is because it's easier to tell a story that way, but it also there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And interviewing can be stressful. So sometimes during stressful times, we have a tendency to ramble on and on. So if you're going in knowing your story, that's going to help you there too. The second thing is, I think it's a great story, John, and certainly for the purposes here, the way you presented it, I think was perfect. But I also love what Lori did by adding in a little more emotion too, by talking about, maybe even in the middle of it, saying, you talk about the tedious fax machines. And boy, I don't know about you, but if you've ever sat next to one of those things, believe me, you don't want to be involved. Or, like bringing the audience into it, which again, for this situation is not necessarily appropriate. And then just the last point I would make is I always like I mentioned I like STAR, which for those of you who don't know, situation, task, action, result. And I add an S at the end, which is, so why am I telling you this? And in that case, it's making that connection. The reason I just told you this story is because I know in this role, there are probably some processes here that could use improvement. And this is a great example of how I can do that and why I would be a great person for this role. So that would be just the last thing I might add and just tie it into the job at hand.
Oh yeah, that's a great addition. Charlie? I think you're muted.
John, I always sound better muted. John, those of you that are not Beacon members, this would have paid for your membership. This one meeting. You will make money, you will get jobs, you'll influence people with these ideas. That having been said, Lori, I used to sell those fax machines. So I apologize. Ken, I put you through hell. I apologize for that. One of the things about the story is the emotional connection is very, very important. So I give Lori high marks for recognizing that. We have to find our own way of connecting with people, and you can't manufacture it. You either feel it or you don't, so you have to be true to yourself. But when I see this particular story, I want to get a sense of what kind of person you are, because you have to fit into our culture. Lori's comment about the last sentence is so important, John. So this is a great example that people can use as a model for the stories they need to develop. And John, how many stories do you feel people should have in their arsenal?
I believe in 20 or more, because every point that you could come up, you need a story. Now, sometimes you can use the same story, different flavors of it, different parts of it to answer different questions. And to Ken's point, I mean, I love the reason I told you this is this, that can help you shape what parts of the story, what am I going to emphasize in this story, or what part of this overall accomplishment am I going to share that supports that reason that I'm going to aim for.
And I think Ken brings up a great point to wrap it up. Ask for the sale, because that's one of the things that we tend not to do. And I know I'm terribly guilty of it. I'm so worried. Are they going to like me? Am I going to have it that I don't articulate? This is why I would be good for you, or this is what I'm looking to share with you or provide. Is this what you're looking for? Because in case they didn't catch it, assume for the moment they're naive if we want to be polite, stupid if we don't want to be polite, and say, have I made my point clear? This is why I want this job, or why I want to make this sale, or whatever it is, and just be direct.
Yep. So as just to emphasize a couple points, bring in that emotional content, make me feel the challenges, and the additions you added, Lori, would be terrific for that. Personalize your stories, even to the point of naming the players or the projects, or if it's too proprietary, they don't want to use their name. Maybe I use that the CFO was worried about this. And remember the audience, adjust the story, adjust the elements, emphasize the points that will resonate with that person in that particular role. So I'll give you one other story before we wrap up. So here was the situation. Jane had recently moved from overseas. Her kids were going to a private school that had the special resources they needed. And then the pandemic hit, creating unexpected financial pressures for the school. And then the treasurer of the school left, leaving them in the lurch. So Jane had a financial background. And so she volunteered to step in on a volunteer basis as the treasurer for the school. She was able to right the ship and prevent what had looked like looming losses. Once she got the finances in order, she was able to help recruit a permanent treasurer to maintain the school's solvency. Now, all that sounds pretty good, right? It's a pretty good story. I was mentioning how people forget to bring in enough of the challenges. How much more powerful is the story if you know these elements? Jane needed to juggle the school's finances and her international consultant. She found that the school was already in trouble and expecting extensive pay cuts and likely the loss of critical staff. Her creative ideas left them more financially solvent than before the pandemic. In fact, instead of pay cuts, they had bonuses. So make sure you emphasize what are the real challenges they faced, and that will lead you maybe to even more impressive results that you can use as well. And that really will power your stories a lot. So remember, every statement in your resume, your cover letter, your engagement bio, your brochure, your LinkedIn profile is an invitation for a question. And you should have a story to back it up. And I know several of you have done this before, but for Rachel or Allison, if you haven't, sorry, I should close the window. If you would like, I'd be happy to set up a 30-minute Kickstart Your Career Search session to simply look at your goals and your challenges that you're facing in your search, positioning you to take action. If you're interested in doing that, here's the link, tinyurl.com/JWH, my initials, calendar. And that'll show you slots where you could sign up to do a 30-minute strategy session.
Can you throw that into the chat so I could copy and paste it, please, really quickly? What you just said, the tiny URL thing. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Where'd my screen go?
Okay. I don't want to inconvenience you. I'll just email you, whatever's easier.
There it is.
Thank you very much.
So anyway, so that's what I want to share today. We're just about at time.
Beacon is a national community of senior-level business leaders committed to sharing, helping, and learning. To find out more, go to beaconforlife.org.